worldwide phenomena. So inshallah, everybody is able to pick up some strategies and tips, but more importantly, looking at being aware of what's happening to your body, what's happening in this time of uncertainty, and looking at some of the strategies to help you through this particular period, but also accepting that a lot of the anxieties are actually quite normal. A lot of the grief is actually quite normal. So by way of background, I am a clinical and forensic psychologist, and we do see a lot of clients come through in our clinics who are experiencing a lot of significant anxiety and stress, and also how it impacts on their daily life within the clinic in which I work. So next screen. Okay, so the reality is everywhere around the world, they're experiencing circumstances around COVID. Some countries might be experiencing severe transformations more than others, but it has transformed the world as we know it. It's negatively impacting on the globe at the economic level, also impacting workforces and also social and psychological levels. So today's presentation, I am focusing on the psychological impact of COVID-19 and its realities on our individual, family, social, and also work life. So obviously different nation states and cities, they've got varied responses in looking at their strategies. Most of my presentation looking at local in terms of Australia, what's happening within the Australian community at large, and looking at dealing with the strategies, which with regards to the strategies, they are also quite universal, and being able to implement it during the period of the pandemic. We've been asked to wear masks. We've been asked to physically and social distance. There's the closure of shops, sporting and gym centres, religious places of congregation also. Most people are working from home. Essential workers are still working at the front line. We've got varied funeral practices. We've got constant bombardment of news headlines and the daily COVID briefings. You know, in Melbourne, I remember last year, Dan Andrews, who's the Premier, you know, he would have his daily COVID briefings. Initially also in Australia when the COVID pandemic occurred, you'd have Scott Morrison during the evening, the Prime Minister of Australia. And in New South Wales, we've got the 11 a.m. briefings by Gladys Berejiklian, the New South Wales Premier. And there's a lot of misinformation that occurs on social media and the internet as well. As we know, the internet is a vast world. We have access to a lot of information, but with all the positives that comes with knowledge, there's also a huge level of misinformation and also conspiracy theories regarding COVID and vaccines. I mean, conspiracy theories have always been around, but I guess with COVID, the situation is that it's affecting everybody individually, you know, families and societies, and also the issue with vaccines. So, and that's a lot of the misinformation, the conspiracy theories are grounded in fear. So when there's fear, you know, you're more susceptible to information that's going to support your fear biases and whatever's making you anxious. And I'll talk about that later also. There's also the failed government response to the vaccine rollout in Australia. This is specific to Australia. Every other country would be quite different. Whoever's got their microphone unmuted, please mute it so I can have my train of thought following. Thank you. And there's also a constant changing of health information and laws. As we know, with the daily briefings, we're asked to look at our the state health website. You know, every day there's a different rule. There could be also different laws. Laws don't change every day, but you know, with a lot of our migrant and refugee communities where English is not their first language, and information is not easily accessible, there's a lot of confusion around the changing information that everybody has to adapt to, because there are consequences to that. You know, there are legal consequences. We've been measured very, very harshly, especially in Melbourne and New South Wales. So people are innocently ignorant and not complying. So there is a lot of confusion, which results in a lot of the stress and a lot of the anxiety. And also in a lot of the bodily symptoms that may come from this, which had not occurred previous to this worldwide pandemic.
I hate it.
So what we're experiencing is a lot of collective grief. So, and it's collective because we're all experiencing it, you know, the whole world, you know, and not even just Australia. And so communities have changed as a whole, you know, it is temporary. So even though it occurred since 2020, you know, it's still going on, and we're now more than halfway through 2021. So it remains uncertain with no end in sight. So especially for example, in Sydney, you know, we thought we had a good handle on the COVID-19 and our response in terms of the health system and the rules that we had. You know, we found out 4 weeks ago that, you know, one outbreak triggered a few hundred. So in Sydney, so we know it's even though we believe that we have a good handle on it, we don't know what's going to happen next. So there's that constant there's a constant notion of uncertainty, and which is understandable why people are going to feel really stressed, angry, and also highly anxious. There's also a loss of normalcy. So the normal as you knew it before COVID-19, you know, is no longer the same. Our life has changed significantly. There's the fear of the economic toll around the world because of the impact on, you know, the workforce, factories being closed and construction being asked to stop working. You know, there's also the loss of connection between, you know, families because we're asked to stay at home. We need to socially distant, and connection to even your friends, you know, your workplace, things that gave you a sense of identity. Is there's that loss of connection, and it's not only to people, you know, it could be sports, could be doing hobbies, you know, where you would socially gather amongst friends. Also, that's all changed because of the conditions that we find ourselves today. There's also that collective confusion, you know, and when I use the word collective, it's because we're all experiencing it. The confusion is not isolated. Often when we have clients who come in, they think that they're the only ones who feel the emotional pain that comes with the COVID-19 realities. So we have to continuously inform that everybody's going through the same circumstance. We might have individual differences in how COVID-19 has impacted our lives, but it is most definitely collective confusion where even the medical professionals, you know, are trying to gather the facts as best they can, you know, given that the daily changes in circumstances and the COVID variants that are creeping up as well. So it's all happening collectively, and we're not used to this kind of collective grief in the air, as COVID-19 is a virus. We haven't been exposed to something as similar or close to this particular phenomenon. So everybody is readily impacted by this. So how do you recognize that if you're impacted in a large way when it comes to COVID-19, where it results in stress and anxiety? Because like I said earlier, you could have gone on about your daily life where everything has been, you know, honkadory. It's an Australian reference. Apologies if you're from overseas, you know, but, you know, suddenly where we're all collectively impacted by COVID-19, you might start to feel a lot of changes in your body and you can't make sense of it. So being able to identify it is actually the first step to being able to cope and also apply strategies. So one of the significant symptoms of feeling stress and anxiety, especially with COVID, is the hyperarousal. And that's when your body suddenly kicks into high alert, thinking about the stressful event, which in this circumstance is the pandemic. It can be the lockdown, it can be the vaccine rollout, your hesitancy towards the vaccine rollout also. The hyperarousal, that response in your body, occurs even if there's a real danger that may not be present. So even if you're isolating in quarantine and the danger is reduced, it doesn't mean that you're free from feeling the hyperarousal. The body acts as if the danger is real and that it leads to bodily stress. So as I said earlier, you've got your daily press briefings actually, and then you've got the constant bombardment of the news, and the information that's out there about COVID-19, whether it's correct or incorrect, a lot of this information starts to impact on your body. So even though you're safe in your home, it doesn't mean that you're free from the hyperarousal response, where you get a jolt, and it may not be a significant jolt, but it's when you're high alert thinking about, whether you're going to be safe from this real danger. However, it still may not be dangerous to you because you're abiding by all the rules and the regulations to keep yourself safe. But even imagined danger can actually trigger hyperarousal because your brain does not know when you're thinking about a topic. Okay, so whether it's a happy topic, something that's happened in your past where it's very positive, your body reacts, in a very pleasant way, and you feel very much content and warm, and if you're laughing at something that's funny, even though you're thinking about it, it's something that can in the past, your body doesn't know that it happened your brain doesn't know it happened in the past. It thinks it's actually present currently. So you've got to be very careful with how you think about these current events, because even though you're not faced by it directly, okay, your body will believe that it is so. So you've got to be very careful with that. Then you've got the hypervigilance, where you're in a state of increased alertness. You're extremely sensitive to your surroundings. Earlier, I heard someone talk about how they went for an exercise on their own, and then they saw somebody who was also walking on the pathway without a mask. They got into an argument about why the other person was not wearing their mask. So there's that heightened risk of alertness that even though they're doing the right thing, they're wearing the mask, and somebody is not, and that person may actually have a mask exemption, so, but we're quick to judge, we're quick to be hyper alert, and extremely sensitive because we're all scared. The anxiety and the fear that comes from COVID-19 and what we're put under is it's actually normal. So you start to scan your environment for any hidden dangers, and that could be related to the hidden dangers in people and also your environment. So going to places where even though you're allowed to exercise, if there's a large group of people, you may choose to avoid that because you're scared that you may come in contact with someone who is COVID positive, for example. And with the COVID concerns and the dangers, they are real, but some people may become quite hypervigilant because, even though they're at home, there's no immediate danger because they're quarantining, they're doing all the right thing. You're not going to catch COVID-19 through your internet wires or through the TV. If you are staying at home, obviously you've got a zero chance of contracting the virus unless you've got family members who may exit the home and so forth. So these are quite significant responses, and they're quite that they do need to be addressed. You may not be able to get rid of them, but there are coping strategies to help you manage them. Okay, so stress and anxiety. So anxiety is a natural human emotion. So whenever someone says, how do I get rid of my anxiety? There's no way you can get rid of your anxiety. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created these emotional states to protect us, in fact. So anxiety helps us through danger. So if you're walking at nighttime and you can hear, someone walking behind you, you might run because you're in a state of danger. So the anxiety response is there to protect you, to keep you safe. If you're driving, and you see a car coming towards you in the wrong way, you might swerve to avoid that danger. And that's an anxiety response, and that's an appropriate anxiety response because our body is geared to survive, and so we need our anxiety response in our body to protect us. So it's a natural response. It's when it gets to a level where it's a bit extreme than the normal, then it becomes a problem. Okay, so that's important to know. Anxiety is not a bad thing. So for example, having stress before an exam, you've done all your work, you've studied, you've summarized, having that little bit of stress can sometimes help you, but having too much stress is obviously not a good thing. And I'll talk about how that impacts on your brain. And I have a visual slide so that it can make you understand that easier. So there are a lot of emotional responses. You could be worrying about the pandemic, and worrying about that can become persistent. But given the pandemic is real and it's gone on for over 18 months, the worrying is normal, but it's when you're worrying over and beyond what is normal. And that I'm not going to put a baseline on what is normal, because we're all experiencing the pandemic very differently. It's when you go over and beyond, where you can't engage in your day-to-day activities. So if you can no longer cook when you cook meals, or do your work, or look after your children, you know, because your nervous system goes haywire and out of whack, and then it stops you from being able to do the things that you would normally be doing. So when it interrupts your day-to-day activities, that's when you know it's gone over and beyond what is normal for you. Okay, it also starts to lead to sleeping problems, difficulties concentrating, so irritability and feeling annoyed. So little things that, you know, parents who are homeschooling, you know, they've got the added responsibility and also added distractions, trying to assist in their homeschooling, you know, so they're feeling highly irritable, annoyed and anxious too, because, you know, they're working from home or doing other things that they're made to do at home because they can't be outside of home. It also triggers anger and angry outbursts, panic, constant anxiety, and also feeling fatigued and exhausted, because you're you're at home more often than not, you know. And before you would go to work, you could travel shopping to farther areas than your local government area. You could, you know, take your family out on the weekends. Because you're pretty much confined at home, it can make you feel exhausted and also fatigued, and not because of lack of movement, because of all the emotions that you're experiencing, you know, that you didn't experience before. It takes a heavy toll, and this is normal. Okay, so what I don't want you to take away from this is, you know, oh my God, I've got all these symptoms. Given the pandemic is real, okay, and it's occurring across the world, and it's occurring in Australia, you know, these are normal. So it's just looking at, and we'll talk about this later, ways to be able to cope with these changes. Other emotional responses: fearing judgment from others, very quick. You know, I talked about the example of earlier, when someone was also exercising, going for a walk, they were without their mask. You know, I've had a lot of clients who have mask exemptions, who always talk about being looked at differently whilst they're out and about and doing the right thing. You know, you might be judged by others extremely harshly. You might develop a black and white thinking. We're either completely safe or are completely at risk. These kinds of black and white thinking is not helpful, and that leads to more anxiety. So you've got to be careful, you know, and what is true, what is not, what is fact, what is not, who's telling the truth and who is not, you know. So we've got a lot of different responses from government, health and law enforcement, you know. So people are prone to, when they're anxious, to go towards black and white thinking, which doesn't help, because it feeds into the emotional part of your brain, that prevents rational and more appropriate thinking, what I'll talk about later. You become emotionally withdrawn, like a sense of hopelessness starts to come about. You'll also have mood swings and outbursts of emotion. And the other bodily symptoms is you start to experience headaches, muscle tension, you know, because that constant fear and uncertainty can tense up your body, and also insomnia. So behavioral responses is the excessive busyness. So those who are working from home, there's a lot of research that's come out, you know, and a lot of business journals who've actually found that people are actually working more, they're actually engaged in more work at home than they were when they were actually in the offices. You know, there's more emails coming through, they have to attend more meetings, there's more Zoom interactions. And those employees, you know, then there's those competing interests with their families at home. They're coping with more interruptions than they would otherwise have when they're at work. They actually have to, they're finding that they're sending more emails after hours, and more after hour emails now than before the lockdown, which lengthens their workday. So, and this is obviously going to lead to a lot of fatigue also. There's a lot of defensiveness, impulsivity, excessive judgment and overreaction. And so people will be very fast to respond to a situation or conversation, not really slowing down, because they're in the state of heightened anxiety and stress. So instead of listening with openness and reflection, we're responding with our fears and anxieties impulsively. There's also self-destructive behavior, taking excessive medications in order to relax, drinking too much, and I'm talking about alcohol here, and even though in Islam we shouldn't be, it's haram to be drinking alcohol, there are those who will consume because they just can't cope or take drugs. So this is also important to note. There's also the anti-lockdown protests that take place. I'm not going to make a judgment call on the anti-lockdown protests, except to say that these are people who are scared and these are people who are fearful. And so the only way, to respond to this is to protest. And their mentality is, no, they feel as if they're not being listened to, the livelihoods are taken away, the government is not listening, so they're using their bodies and using their voices to go out and engage in these. Again, I'm not making any judgment calls, but these are people who are legitimately scared. We all process information very differently, and that has to be respected. We're all humans. I mean, human psychology, we all have different mental processing of information, and some people are more fearful than others. And this is one way that they're responding, rightfully or wrongly. And also social isolation. There's also the anticipatory grief, the feeling that we're getting about what the future holds that is uncertain. And that's to do with a lot of imagined fears, that there's a storm coming, there's a lot more restrictions, stage 1, 2, or 3, or 4 in terms of the lockdown. There's something bad out there, we've got to stay at home, it's a virus, we can't see it, we don't understand it. There's even people questioning whether it exists or not, and these are people who are prone to misinformation, and those people exist, and we have to acknowledge that, and minimize calling them names and so forth. If you do understand rationally what's going on, call yourself privileged in that you're able to use your rational information processing of your prefrontal cortex and understanding the reality of things. So be compassionate to other people. So our emotional brain is telling us that something bad is out there and it's lurking, and we can't see it, and so it breaks your sense of safety. Okay, and it hurts when and it makes you angry when you've lost that sense of safety, and it makes you incredibly fearful as well. Especially in Australia, where we believe that we live in a safe environment. And when it comes to COVID anyway, initially Australia had a very better outcome, Australia and New Zealand, than other parts of the world as well. But according to our standards, compared to others, because we're obviously judging ourselves within our local standards, we do feel a loss of safety with regards to the pandemic. So, and this also is experienced collectively as a group because it's new and we are trying to make sense of it. And just because we haven't made sense of it in 18 or so months does not mean, that we're falling short, because we're getting new information all the time. But the problem is the new information is coming in very fast. Okay, and this is why the anxiety is actually quite increasing. And we're also grieving at the micro level, which is individually, and also as a society at the macro level. So grief and loss that's occurring, it's a universal human emotion. It's emotional pain. So the reality of the pain needs to be acknowledged, and it's normal. It's a natural response and an ongoing response to loss, because it haven't finished. Pandemic is here and we haven't been able to minimize it. It's still ongoing. Grief and loss is actually timeless. It's cross-cultural. So it doesn't matter what kind of cultural background you come from, but we do have different ways of responding culturally. Okay, but grief and loss exists across cultures. And it does present differently across time. For example, Sydney is in a harder lockdown than Melbourne at the moment, in Queensland. But then last year, Melbourne has experienced 5 different lockdowns. So we're experiencing this grief and loss quite differently. Also, grief and loss is actually quite adaptive. So we respond and we change our responses to that as new information comes through. It's also a loss in terms of our daily lives, and it's related to attachment. So, loss is, we're looking at the people that we love in terms of our relationships, we can't visit them, we can't see them. The most we can do is watch them online. But also, if we lose a family member to COVID-19, whether they're in ICU and struggling or whether they've passed away, Allah yarhamhum, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect everybody. But there is that sorrowful reaction to losing someone or something that you love, and you could have loved your work and employment and you've lost it, because now there's higher unemployment because of the pandemic. You could lost your connection to your community, going to the masjid, going to the mosque, going to community programs, and also going to classes, meeting friends. So that's also a loss and a grief, and that can't be minimized, because being connected to family and friends and community is very important for your mental health, as well. Losing someone you love naturally results in grief. It won't destroy you. And we also have to tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the planner of everything. Everything is in His hands. He understands the nature of things. So, once we make the effort to do the right thing, we wear our mask, we're socially distant, we stay at home, unless you're allowed to be out of home, so we tie our camel, and then we leave the rest up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and if you're not Muslim and you're listening to this, tying the camel is a Islamic reference to a hadith. So the funerals during COVID will also be different. There's less people who are allowed to attend funerals. So we need to be able to focus on things that we can control and then leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And having that patience and perseverance and being able to cope with these changes. You can only do what is within your capacity to control, and understand in time that you will heal. This is very important, that, we know even before the pandemic, we suffered losses along our life. But given the nature of the pandemic, we may feel as if that there is no end, but inshallah, it'll pass. And so we just need time to deal with the loss and heal, given the continued uncertainty. So what I'm trying to do is normalize these experiences, making no promises, that, everything will get better, because everything is not in my hands, but in the same token, I want you to be kind and compassionate to yourself. So it's okay to grieve. It's all okay to feel a sense of loss and anxiety and stress during these uncertain times. So in terms of coping and the brain, it's very important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a brain. He gave us a physical part of our brain. Our minds we can't touch, we can't control. Our soul exists, it's immaterial. We also can't control that. But what we do have capacity to be able to regulate is the way we think about things, the way we respond to circumstances. So we actually have three parts to our brain that we were given during birth, and they develop at different times. I don't want to give a whole neuroscience lecture, but what I do want you to understand is that when we're born, we have that primitive part of the brain, which is the temperature control, being able to sense, having the five senses, breathing, our heart rate, and so forth. They're things that we can't control. But then we have our emotional brain that gets developed during childhood, and that's why kids tend to be very egotistical, and they cry and scream and shout and laugh, and very quickly they don't understand consequences. They're very much guided by their emotional reaction, which you can see on the screen where it says the amygdala, the limbic system is there, and that's the emotional side of our brain. And as we get older, so above the ages of 7, 8, 9, and 10, when kids start asking a lot of questions, their smart brain is being developed. And that's the outer cortex, the outer region of the brain. And the prefrontal cortex, so once we reach abstract thinking, being able to understand abstract concepts, truth, falsehood, right and wrong, justice, love, and injustice, all of those, that's where our prefrontal cortex is maximized up until the age of 25. But we're able to use our prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, the smart part of the brain, where we can make decisions, process information, and problem solve, and make so we're able to calm down our emotional brain through the prefrontal cortex. Now, when you're under stress, you're not going to be able to regulate and control the amygdala, the center of fear, because you're allowing the emotions, the anxieties, the stress, the hyperarousal and the fear overtake your thought process. What you want to be able to do is allow yourself to be calm and relaxed, and centered and grounded and mindful, have khushu in your salah, continuously, to be able to access the prefrontal cortex, where you can, even though you're hearing information on the news, you're able to process it, in a way that doesn't reactivate your fear response, having that heightened sense of uncertainty, and I've got some strategies later on to help you through that. But what I want you to get from this picture is that when your prefrontal cortex is stimulated, it's heightened, it's your go-to place when you're trying to understand what's happening around you, then you're able to calm down those emotional responses, and then you're able to act in a more appropriate way to information. You're not always going to have a sensed hyperarousal and a hyperactive response to information, which then triggers your immune system to also slow down. And to protect yourself from illnesses and diseases, you need your immune system to be highly active. That's really important. So if you're on the right side of the screen, if your mode of operation is always under stress, okay, you're going to have a weaker control of your thoughts, emotions, and actions. So information that is factual, that goes against your belief, you're not going to be able to process appropriately. You're still going to only look for information that confirms with your fearful response. Now, this is not true, because you're believing what your body feels. I feel this, therefore it is true. But this is not how mature information processing works. Okay, factual information you should be able to process that, and you can only do that once you're calm and collected, despite the uncertainty that exists. So that's what you should be trying to aim yourself to go through, so that you have a tighter control of your thoughts, emotions, and actions. So I want you to tattoo this image in your brain, in your thoughts, in your mind's eye, and always when you're thinking about information, or you're reading information, you're watching the news. So, okay, what state am I in now? Okay, am I able to process this information appropriately so I don't increase my own stress response? And so I can take in the factual information, and then act and respond to that. Okay, so that's really important. That's why in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't judge any of our actions and behaviors until we reach puberty and also can access abstract reasoning. Okay, that's when our prefrontal cortex is very highly activated, and we can process information. We can know the rights from wrongs, But unfortunately, those who remain fearful, they're going to only accept information that feeds their cognitive or thinking biases that do exist, and it is harmful, not only to yourself, but to others as well, when you're guided by your emotions. Sorry, I'm just going to pick up my phone because I don't know what time it is, so I know how much time I have left. Okay, all right, sorry, I do apologize for that. Okay, so now if we look at coping, you need to be able to look at ways to be able to calm your body, and to also want to come into the present, and so you want to be in the here and now. You don't want to be stuck in, the same level of uncertainty and anxiety that occurred in 2020, okay, because the body has a memory system. Your nervous system has a memory. So if you were coping throughout your life and then all of a sudden we had the COVID pandemic, so your nervous system has now new imprints, of anxiety, uncertainty, and fear. Okay, so if you haven't been able to cope since then, okay, so that means that you're not relatively in the present, where you're able to dismiss information that's incoming into your mind or into your brain, and be able to calm yourself down, because you don't want to be in a heightened state of anxiety like I said, it can contribute to more illnesses. And try as much as you can to adopt these strategies that I'm going to be talking about now. You need to remind yourself that this is temporary. No virus in the history of the world, stayed forever. Medical professionals, rightfully have been able to come up with appropriate measures. In this case, we've got vaccines, and I'm not going to discuss whether that's right or wrong, but vaccines have been used in the past, to help us address viruses that have harmed communities, made scores of people die. So science is here and the medical science is here to help us, so we can actually protect ourselves actually from the pandemic and in the future. So what I want you to also do is be kind to your thoughts and your body. Okay, so if it's really hard on you right now and you can't concentrate and focus, you need to be able to forgive yourself, because it's okay, it's normal. When we're with our clients, especially mental health professionals in this period of the pandemic, we're always reminding our clients that this period for them, when they're struggling, they can't cope, they can't concentrate, they can't keep up with trying to homeschool their children and also work, and also look after the home, and keep up with up-to-date news, and so it is okay, and even if, I do have a controversial view about all of this, where, kids are still expected to go to school, be online, and it can be extremely draining, that, give your kids a bit more time out, even though if they're required to be at school, because their nervous system in this period of development, okay, so their brains are still developing. So if they're in a constant phase of anxiety, this is going to impact them during their adulthood. So try and give your kids a bit more time out. Let them play, okay? Talk to your kids about what is happening. Help them feel safe. They may not talk to you about what is happening in their daily life. So parents need to be proactive about this. And talk to your kids openly about what is happening. This is fairly important. So, okay, so pause, reflect, and also breathe. This is actually very important. We feel as if life is really rushed during the pandemic. We feel as if we need to have constant awareness of what's happening in the news. Yes, we should know what is happening, but just give yourself a period of time to catch up, and then just learn to let go as well. You don't need to have constant absorption of what is happening in terms of the pandemic. Take slow breaths. And a lot of the people, when we do or conduct slow breathing, be able to slow breathe appropriately. So a lot of people, when they do the slow breathing, they breathe through their chests and not through their abdomen or the diaphragm. So when you're taking in the deep breaths, it's important you breathe in with your nose, okay? But when you're breathing in, make sure it's your diaphragm or your gut that's expanding and not your chest. If your chest is moving, when you're trying to inhale and exhale, you're doing it wrong. Okay, so when you are breathing, okay, so make sure that when you're breathing in, okay, your gut is coming out, your tummy is coming out. And when you're breathing out, okay, exhale through your mouth. It's probably better and more powerful. And then also bring your tummy back in. And the best ways to do the breathing in and breathing out, just to reset your body, is to inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 2 seconds, and then breathe out for 6 seconds. Okay, when you're breathing in, you're activating the anxiety response, which is natural and normal, but when you're breathing out, you're activating your relaxed response. That's why, the breathing out always should be longer than breathing in. Okay, so you want to try and normalize that, so even if you were to set an alarm we all have smartphones, if you were to set every 2 hours, an alarm for yourself to do some slow breathing, do that slow breathing response for about 5 minutes, and you can do that even if you're working, even if you're watching TV, even if you're cooking, because it's like a quiet and silent exercise that you're doing. The only time you shouldn't be doing this exercise is if you're driving, because when you're driving, you need your heightened sense of alertness. So you don't want to feel so relaxed, because if you need to make a quick move, you need to be in that state of alertness. So don't use this technique when you're driving or if you're operating heavy machinery. So if you're still working in a factory, or in construction, don't use this technique when you're on site. Just use this when you are not engaged in those particular behaviors or practices or actions. Okay, so 5 minutes is all you need, and then you can normalize that, and then you'll start to learn how to breathe naturally, appropriately, because a lot of my clients who have anxiety breathe through the chest, and this is the wrong way to breathe. So one of the ways you can actually try to do this is if you Google diaphragm breathing videos, on YouTube, you'll be able to learn the appropriate technique and to start slowing down your nervous system, and then thinking more clearly. So if you can breathe better, okay, you're able to think better also. Your body's connected to your brain and your mind, okay? So, and when you are breathing slowly, notice how you're feeling and what you're thinking about without judgment, and instead of reacting very quickly to thoughts or feelings, just note them and let them go. So it's important you are aware of what's happening. So even if you can tell that your body is a little bit anxious, be aware, but know in time as you're doing the breathing, that you are going, your body is going to slow down and you will feel better for it. And what I do with my Muslim clients is that once you get the rhythm of the breathing, the 4-2-6, with the numbers, so try with the numbers first. And as you get the rhythm going, nice and rhythmically, you can then, instead of counting, you can inhale saying, Subhanallah, hold for 2. And then as you exhale, you can say Alhamdulillah, or you can say relax. Don't use words that are too long or a phrase. Use something nice and deep and slow. Okay, so you can incorporate any meaningful concept, that is helpful for you. That's why as you exhale, you can use, Alhamdulillah, you can use relax, you can use calm. Okay. In terms of human movement is actually very, very important. Okay, because a lot of people are stuck at home, and this is going to make you more fatigued. When you are just staying indoors, you're still allowed to walk and exercise, as part of the rules and regulations, but you can't just walk and exercise in groups. You can only have one other family member with you. So you can walk around your neighborhood, walk in your backyard, you can go for a jog or run, you can stretch, and straight after that I put praying, because we know when we pray we are stretching as well, but you might want to do a bit more stretching, because when you're constantly sitting down, you're weakening your muscles also, and weakening the connections. And that's why you'll feel more exhausted. You probably think, well, I'm sitting, I'm not doing anything, but you will be more fatigued from sitting down watching Netflix, or watching movies. We're hoping you're doing something a bit more productive than that. But even if you are, we're in a pandemic, it's, I'm not going to make any judgment calls. It's okay. So whatever you're using to cope, so you're not feeling anxiety, is still a good thing, because the pandemic is real, and so whatever you're using to adopt, and just whatever's working for you, go with that. So using mindful movements, yoga is also very good, because there are structured ways of stretching that can help your body and your ligaments, and also that's actually very good for your mental health. It's also good for reducing pain as well, because when you're sitting down, it causes muscle pain too. You're probably thinking, why am I experiencing pain if I'm just sitting down and watching movies and whatnot? You will experience pain if you're constantly sitting down or lying down when you're sleeping. So if you're just sitting and sleeping, so human movement is going to help you reset your body. Dancing vigorously, so fast movements, is actually very helpful. So even if you were to put on any sheet or any music, and just jump around, for 5 minutes to reset your body, get your body going, because you always want to be able to process information appropriately, and without human movement, it's not going to help your psychology, okay, or your mental processing. So it's very, very important you still incorporate some rigorous movement in your daily diet. Okay. And a strategy is using a very, very simple technique for high interval intensity training. You know, you could run on the spot. So you could be in your home. So you don't need to be outside. You can run on the spot very fast, you know, for about 10 seconds, not high knees, but running on the spot, you know, with your feet. And then you can just relax and, you know, gather yourself together for 20 seconds, you know, use your slow breathing techniques, you know, so you're breathing through your gut, not through your chest. But that will get harder because exercise makes your body pump. And then after that 20 seconds, you start running again very fast, you know, on the spot for 10 seconds. And then you repeat this for about 5 minutes. Okay, so you can do this running on the spot technique to reset your body, get yourself going, have your mental state movement. And interestingly, this technique, this specific technique, will also help you counteract your anxiety also. Because when you think about anxiety, you know, anxiety has the same response as exercise. Your heart is racing, you're feeling tired, you know, you're feeling flustered, you've got all the muscle tension, you can't breathe. It's the same bodily reaction. Yet one is helpful, which is exercise, one is unhelpful, which is the anxiety. So if you do a lot of this technique, it'll counteract and actually reduce your anxiety symptoms. Laughing, that goes without saying. I love laughter therapy. So watching comedy, laughing with family at home or friends on the screen, or watching something that is making you belly laugh is also very good. Okay, I'm mindful of time. Grounding techniques, engage your senses. So if you have a backyard, access to backyard, you have a garden, you have grass, walk on that bare feet. That will send signals to your brain. So we all have a lot of sensors under our feet, thousands and thousands. So that will send, you know, calming signals to our brain because it's natural. You know, I remember when one of the sheikhs, Abdul Hakim Murad, came to Australia, he was giving a lecture and he said that after war, the Rasul used to take, you know, he used to take the Sahaba in the battle to the desert, you know, just to take some time out. You know, this is a grounding technique. So what I'm asking you to do is walk on the ground, you know, not with your shoes, not with your socks. Have the sole of your feet touch the natural part of the ground. So perform wudu, take a shower, hot or cold, or a warm bath, hug your family members, you know, cuddle your pets, smell bakhur, or the incense or the candles or essential oils, especially lavender. Lavender has, there's a lot of science towards lavender relaxing our nervous system, you know, our nervous tension as well. Enjoy smelling and tasting. You know, my favorite is coffee. You know, some people like tea. You know, just pay close attention to the aroma and the taste as well. So grounding techniques, enjoying those senses, because these serve also as an effective and therapeutic distraction technique. Okay. So, and connect with family, friends in the community. Just because you can't physically visit, you know, you can still connect with them on FaceTime, on Zoom, on social media, you know, through video chats and so forth. Talk to people that you can trust, keep in regular contact with people, and tell them how you're feeling and share your concerns. And it's okay not to you know, be okay or feel okay. This is something that we cannot control. You know, we do believe in our deen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners. So there's a wisdom in this we don't understand, but we apply tawakkul Allah on tawakkul Allah, and that is a coping process, because this is bigger than us. You know, it's bigger than the government, it's bigger than all the medical professionals, but we're asked, you know, to try and sort and figure ourselves out, you know, figure out what is happening, you know, and so we're relying on those who are professionals in the area to sort this out for us. But in essence, you know, we also need to keep our social connections going, because even before the pandemic, we know as mental health professionals that being connected to your social networks, family, friends, and communities, that buffers you against mental health issues. You know, so everyone has mental health, just like you have physical health and spiritual health. You know, so mental health, everybody has it. You know, but you start to develop mental health problems, when you have a disturbance towards the way you're thinking, the way you're processing information, the way you're interacting with other people, family and relationships, and the way that you're behaving as well. Okay, so social networks, having a good type of family, friends, community can buffer and prevent and manage mental health problems. This is very, very important. So don't try not to isolate yourself. So even when, young boys, you've got, your young boys on playing games and, with their friends, this is helpful too. As much as you think this is unproductive, this is still helping their mental health, as long as they're not addicted to the games, but them playing online with friends, connecting with their friends, is still helpful, So do get up and go to bed at similar times during the day, even if there is a pandemic. Just try and keep a routine. But if you can't keep a routine, that's okay. Again, that's okay. But if you can structure your day, fine. If you can't, that's fine too. Okay, keep up with your personal hygiene. Just because you're at home and not at work, and you would normally, have a shower before work and after work, just keep up with that as well, and feel refreshed. Eat healthy meals at regular times. I know a lot of people are snacking to cope. Again, that's fine too. But just as long as you're moving as well. So even though you're snacking, but just move a bit more. Exercise regularly, 3 or 4 of intense physical movement, stretching. Allocate time for working and time for resting. Make time for doing things that you enjoy, and take regular breaks from on-screen activities. This is especially the case when you're working from home, and because there is such thing as Zoom fatigue. Obviously, don't use alcohol and drugs as a way of dealing with the fear, anxiety, boredom, and also social isolation, or taking too much medication, or too much sleeping. So now, us as a community getting together, yes, physical social gatherings, those supports have been removed, especially for elderly people who would have that as their constant go-to, where they would go and do their regular prayers at the mosque. Even coming together collectively as a community, going to community centers, learning centers. But despite the uncertainty, the deaths, and the chaos, we're still able to show the resilience and significant adaptation skills, where we're compensating. We've got all these compensation strategies to cope with the imposed social isolation. So we've got a lot of online activities. There's projects and programs and initiatives that are created online to offer support, solidarity, physical and psychological, religious and spiritual well-being. People are coming together virtually, even offering, sports and activities. Gyms that are closed now offering, exercises online. People looking creative ways to connect with family and friends, and doing spiritual and religious activities. Sermons, so Friday prayers, are now online. Also, there are Facebook groups that are connecting people, designated COVID-19 groups, as long as they're not the conspiracy theory groups, just so you can pick up some tips. There's even charities coming virtually online to help those, in need, so that on the ground they can help you also. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip some slides. Okay, so the COVID pandemic, it continues to increase uncertainty. We know that, increase our worries, anger, depression. It forces us to reevaluate our lives. It challenges us, and as humans, we are required to, we have adaptation mechanisms that help us cope with uncertainty. We have the motivational drives to want to know what is happening when things are uncertain, to exercise a level of comfort for us, and security and safety. Remember, safety is instinctual. So when we feel as if when we're unsafe, that's where anxiety hits as well. So, I'll talk about grief. I've got only a few minutes left. I'm just going to skip. Okay, no, I can talk about grief then. Okay, so there are stages of grief that help us understand what is happening, that, and they can interchange in terms of levels, but it results in a level of acceptance also. So they're not linear. Okay, so initially we could have felt during the COVID pandemic started that, you know, we're safe. It's not going to affect us. The virus won't get anywhere near us, you know. But as we succumb to the reality of what is actually happening, you know, the lockdowns and the closures, and, you know, working from home, and school is at home as well, you know, then there's anger, which is legitimate. That's why I'm trying to normalize the emotions that we feel, you know, where you're angry at the government is making you stay at home and is taking away your activities and your work, you're unemployed now, and that anger is actually legitimate. You know, they're forcing us to do, you know, A, B, and C, and, you know, that anger response, it's a normal part of the grieving cycle. And then there's the bargaining stage of when you're grieving. Okay, all right, I'll social distance, I'll physical distance, you know, for, you know, the next week or 5 days or 2 weeks, and everything should be okay. You know, by then you have an expectation that, okay, I'm going to follow the rules, you know, everything should be okay. But then there's an element of sadness, and also could be anger as well, that because this isn't ending, you know, so that feeling of sadness, you know, is real. Sorrow, you know, so accept that this is normal. Okay, so I'm trying to normalize all of this, you know, and then finally there's the acceptance. You know, you're trying to figure out how to proceed, how to cope with all of this. You know, okay, I'm complying with all the rules. You know, I'm safe and so safely social distancing, staying at home, quarantining, self-isolating, working from home. You know, I'm working virtually, you know, and studying virtually, you know, university or any sort of work. So you're accepting, okay, I've got to get tested every 3 days, you know, so that the government can keep up to date with COVID numbers and so forth, you know. So there's the acceptance that comes through there. If you've reached acceptance, you know, that's a good thing, but doesn't mean you can't feel the sorrow and the sadness and the anger, you know, that also comes into play. So reach out for help if you need it. And obviously don't hesitate to access professional help. You know, there are a lot of psychologists who are offering telehealth also, or mental health professionals. You know, you could speak to your GP, they can make a referral. There's also helplines that are available also. Specifically for the Australian Muslim community, we have Hayat Line. You know, it's a free and confidential crisis support line. And it's supporting individuals when they're experiencing personal crisis or emotional distress. We have seen an increased number of callers during the pandemic, especially in the last few weeks. You know, so feel free to call, you know, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, you know, for that free and confidential support. And the counsellors on the line are professional, postgraduately trained professionals. So you're getting people who can help you and also refer you to appropriate other mental health professionals or services that you may need. So it's an emotional support line for suicide prevention. And we deal with the people who call with, obviously, compassion, connection, rahma, nasiha, and also hope. And also, so Hayat Line is a national line for Australian Muslims, but there's also the Centre for Wellbeing in Victoria. They actually have a database on their website where you could be linked to mental health professionals in Victoria. Hayat Line, that's managed by Mission of Hope. We are going to put on the Mission of Hope website very, very shortly also national contacts of mental health professionals, because we are finding that most of the callers want to be referred. So we are going to put a database on there so that it's within your reach, and you don't have to call to get a referral number. We're going to make that available to you. There's also Lifeline that's available 24 hours of the day, 7 days a week. Beyond Blue, there's the men's helpline, kids helpline, and 1-800-RESPECT in Australia. So we do have those supports available. So that's, whoops, okay. I'm just going to go back to the first slide. So it shows Isra, who are the hosts, and I'm going to stop sharing possibly. Or is Zuleha going to come and...
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm actually, thanks for that, Hanan. That was really good. So this is our commercial break now. Or actually before that, I just want to thank you. And I think particularly normalizing that we have some level of emotional, distress is that it's normal. I think that's very good. Otherwise, we do hate on ourselves sometimes for feeling down or feeling anxious, but obviously we have to keep check of ourselves, as you said. So just want to, we will go to questions, but before we do that, I wanted to just show you our Israel website. There was someone who was asking about whether there's, if online halakas. As Israel, we have a lot of upcoming events, so that I've got that here. So if you go onto the Israel page, you'll see that we've got a number of other events coming up. So I would say keep an eye on that. But we do have another exciting initiative that we're working on with Hanan. We've got a graduate certificate in Islamic psychology course that's been approved and will be offered through Charles Sturt University. And Hanan and I have been working closely on this. And it's a course that will be predominantly taught by Hanan. So please watch this space. Applications should be opening on 8th of August. That is, you should be able to apply through the Charles Sturt University site 8th of August onwards. But in the meantime, if you have any questions about the course, you can inquire here, and the Israel staff will be able to answer your questions as best as they can, or they will provide you with more information as soon as it's available. So here we've got some information about the subjects that will be offered, for example. So that's in a nutshell. Okay, I'll stop sharing. And at the moment we've got Q&A time. I do have quite a few. So we've got the recording. A few of you asked about the recording. So we have recorded this session, and if you are interested, then if you've registered for this event, you will get the recording automatically. If you haven't registered and you just got the Zoom link, then please just email info@isra.org.au and you should be able to and just request it. So with the questions, I've been capturing the questions as we've been going along. And so I'm going to read them, and then you might want to give somewhat, I'd brief you. I think if I know you well enough, you probably would. Just if you could, I've got about 7 or 8 questions and a few more might come through. So just letting you know, and we've got about 20 minutes to go. Okay, so the first question, you talked about the hypervigilance that we have at the moment with the pandemic. Will this leave once the threat leaves? So basically, once the pandemic ends. Okay, so if you're feeling a sense of hypervigilance now, well, the key is to reduce it now, not wait until the pandemic ends. So because the coping strategies will help you deal with the realities of things. So even if the pandemic continues for another year or 2 or even 5 years, we don't know, being able to eliminate hypervigilance is an indication you're able to cope despite the uncertainty. The difference is the pandemic is new to us. It's we're very fortunate in Australia where we haven't experienced pandemics, or major disasters where we've been impacted on it. Let me go back a step. We've had, bushfires and floods and so forth, but with this pandemic, because it's consistent, it's enduring, and it's ongoing at the moment. What I would suggest is try to reduce it. So if you use the strategies I asked or recommended, then that will help reducing that hypervigilance, because if you're able to calm your body down, when there's new information or news, or you're watching a video that's related to the pandemic, which is quite serious and impacting all of us, you'll be able to receive the information calmly, and then respond appropriately and maturely and in a way that's actually helpful and beneficial. So the idea of the hyperarousal is that, if you do start to experience a regular bout of hyperarousal, try and work towards minimizing it and eliminating it. So for example, at the moment, during the pandemic, because,
probably being a psychologist and already adopting the skills I'm asking you or recommending for you to adopt, the hyperarousal about the pandemic is not there. You know, okay, what do we need to do? How should we go about doing it? You know, and then following through, applying tawakkul ala Allah, you know, but even if you're still feeling anxious, it's okay. Just continue using the calming techniques or the coping strategies or the exercises or the grounding, and then you will watch it slowly decrease. Now, obviously, don't expect it to change if you're only trying to use these techniques for 3 days, you know, or a week. It needs to be consistent. You know, any habit, like we have Ramadan, you know, we have Ramadan for 30 days that helps us change habits that we wish to change, you know, that's going to help us. So science says that, you know, habit changing takes about 40 days to over 200 days to change, you know, and that could be something as simple as, you know, developing a habit of drinking more water during the day. You know, it does take about 40 days to start to make that habitual. So don't apply these strategies for a week or two. I'm, you know, recommending that you do it consistently. We all have smartphones. I mentioned that, you know, I actually, when I have a client in session, I take their smartphones and I put alarms with references to what they're recommended to do during this time, you know, so it triggers a reminder. You know, during this, when you're working from home, time can fly, you know, it's like Groundhog Day. So having something that reminds you is also beneficial. Putting sticky notes, you know, different parts of the room to remind you to do things. You know, even if you're cooking, you know, do your slow breathing. You know, put a sticky note, you know, near a cupboard and say, okay, do your slow breathing. Once, if you're stirring something for, you know, for about 10 minutes, you know, do your slow breathing for 5 of those 10 minutes. So it's about consistency to change those habits, because that's what you want to achieve, is that long lasting symptom reduction. So going back to pre-COVID functioning.
With regards to the breathing, a question that was asked is it normal to feel dizzy?
Yes. So one of the symptoms of anxiety is dizziness, and it can also be numbness. It's opposite. You know what I mean? You could have, you know, feeling of numbness, or even you know, feeling you're not even here, because day in, day out, you're stuck at home. You
But
know,
the breathing activity that you were proposing, can that make you dizzy as well?
So which activity? Sorry, I didn't hear.
The breathing activity, you know, you inhale for 4
Oh,
seconds.
okay. Here's the thing with the breathing activity, and what I have found in session with my clients. If you find yourself, when you're doing the breathing activity, that you're dizzy afterwards, great, that means you're doing it properly, because you're going from a period of not breathing properly, you know, every day, day in, day out. You're unlearning this technique, and you're actually relearning the most appropriate way, a normal way to breathe. If you ever see a young baby asleep, you'll see their tummy, you know, going up and down. If you ever just sit back and monitor your breathing, you'll see that your chest is the one chest is moving, and then, you know, hang on, okay, I'm not breathing the right way. I've got to, you know, unlearn this and relearn the appropriate way to breathe, which is through your tummy, through your diaphragm. It's not breathing through your chest. So when you start to feel a little bit dizzy after you do the breathing techniques, that's okay. Just stay sitting, you know, but don't feel as if, okay, it's not working for me, I'm not going to do this again. No, continue doing it, you know, because your body's now readjusting to the normal way, and a lot of your mental processing will actually enhance, and your fears will decrease, because when you're chest breathing, in fact, okay, you're going to incorporate and absorb all the fearful information, okay, because you're chest breathing, and that increases the anxiety, decreases your immune system, okay, and it doesn't allow the blood flow to go to your brain, and you want the blood flow to go to your brain. So breathing slowly, appropriately is actually key to all of that. I can't hear you.
I muted myself. It's pouring weather here.
Okay.
So I've got quite a few questions, so maybe we'll try to be quick. How can we support our Year 12 students who are going through the stress of HSC and the effects of lockdown and COVID? Now, a related question, I'll read that too, Hanan. I'm a HSC teacher and have a son in Year 12. I can feel their pain and anxiety. How can I support them better? It's so hard when I can't see them in person, they're students. I'm also unsure what to do with my son. Do I just allow him to do nothing so as to protect his mental health?
No, allowing him to do nothing is not going to help him, because, naturally in the schooling, we've been taught that, year 12 is our make or break, our HSC, result. Unfortunately, it is one of the ways we nurture our kids. This is the finality of the year 12, and this is going to dictate your future. That's not necessarily true, but that's how they've been motivated. So what I'm going to suggest is not to change that, but to ask them to, in between their study, is to work around efficient breaks and exercising, listening to nasheed or music, connecting with their friends, watching comedy, doing things that are going to stimulate their mind, because they're going to have to do the exams. Now there are support systems at school. Like, for example, I remember last year in Sydney, when we had the year before, the bushfires. So the universities would take on students regardless of their university result. So if there are institutions who are giving pathways to students, that could help the students who are studying to know, okay, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't mean they should stop learning and reading and doing their homework and summarizing for the HSC, but what they need to be able to do is to reset, because they're used to face-to-face learning. This is new for them, and this is their developing brains here. So something that is uncertain and new will affect them, because they used to be able to meet face-to-face with their friends, because friends bring in a sense of normalcy and certainty, and also improves their mental health, because peer engagement is actually fairly important. So if they're still connecting with their friends, that's fairly important. And if it's the teacher who wants to, the teachers, I know there's a lot bearing on them, and let's be frank, the government has applied a lot of pressure on the teachers, to do more with a lot less time. And we have to acknowledge and salute, their efforts, and all the frontline workers. So be creative with your learning. Let it be a bit more fun and interactive. Even if you had to, make it more playful, jokes and laughter, that brings a sense of community. If it's just straight black and white learning, that's not going to invite learning, because people are stressed from the online learning also. So breaking it up a bit. And even if you do exercises during, your classes, you get up all together and, do for a few minutes running on the spot, so change the learning where you're including a bit more exercise. Interestingly, when I was growing up at school, a long time ago, in the 80s in primary school, we used to do everyday exercise before we learnt. So, and it actually helped learn. When you look at all the signs towards, exercise, it actually improves mood, and it also improves learning. So if you're a teacher, regardless of whether it's in the curriculum or not, in your session, you're the teacher, include a bit of exercise, physical exercise in the session to help students learn as well. And a bit of laughter doesn't hurt, actually helps as well, as long as you're not laughing at the expense of those who are in the Zoom session. That's really important. So yeah, so exercise, I would say, is key. I have no answer for the institutional responses.
All right. I think there's more comments. Everyone, I don't think, please, if you haven't written a question yet, I think if we can get through the ones we've got here, that will probably be it. So just the next one, if there's any questions you feel are not general enough, feel free to say pass, Hanan. I have panic disorder and have made a lot of progress this year, alhamdulillah. However, since the latest extension of lockdowns, I'm getting strange intrusive thoughts out of nowhere. I find if I acknowledge them as intrusive, they start to disappear. But I'd like to understand why they're happening, how to stop them.
Okay, so if you've identified this panic disorder, so what I firstly would suggest is to see a mental health professional, and you could talk to your doctor, and he'll refer you to a psychologist under the Medicare program. As you know, in Australia, you have subsidized Medicare up to 20 sessions per calendar year. So I suggest you do that first, and also psychologists and mental health workers who can access Medicare, they can also offer telehealth as well. Now, in answer to the intrusive thoughts, this is normal, and when you're starting to overthink and there's a lot of uncertainty, what I do suggest, generally, so because when you've got panic disorder, you don't have any control of the intrusive thoughts, which is why I said speak please to a psychologist or mental health professional. But if you do have intrusive thoughts, one of the techniques I use myself and I tell my clients, provided you don't have a clinical disorder, so I'm talking generally now, as soon as you have we call it waswas as Muslims, as soon as you have a thought, that's uncomfortable, it's causing you distress, ask yourself, is this thought helpful? I live by this all the time, honestly. And if the answer is no, if the thought is not helpful, then okay, I don't think about it. I'll distract myself. I'll think about something else, get on with what I'm doing, go walk to the next room, go wash your face, go make yourself a cup of, I'll say coffee before tea, so, go pat your cat, do something, or smell, light a candle, smell to distract you, to distract you sense-wise, make dua, or easily say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. You're seeking refuge from Allah, from that thought, because automatic negative thoughts we cannot control. Okay, so waswas we can't control. The only person who didn't have automatic negative thoughts is Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so he didn't have those kind of intrusive thoughts. We're all not the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so we're going to have these negative automatic thoughts. So be kind to yourself, because you had no control over the waswas. Okay, but once you can identify the waswas, okay, say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So be conscious of it. You are not that thought. It is external to you. It's when you start to find meaning in that waswas, to give it reality, then you're in trouble. Okay, so understand that this thought is external to you. Okay, so just shoo it away. You just park it. Okay, it's not you. It's just a thought. Off it goes. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Is this thought helpful? No. Okay, move on. Okay, don't let it linger, because the minute you attach emotion to it, so just say, for example, you're thinking, oh my God, why is she staring at me? Because now I know a lot of people are staring at me. Okay, what if my hijab isn't on properly? What if they think I'm fat? What if they think I'm ugly and whatever? Oh my God, and then my body starts to churn up. It's not, by the way, because I generally don't care what people think about me. And that's a good coping mechanism. But if you start to attach emotions, you will feel it in your body and you will start to believe it. Why? Because your body's feeling it and you believe what you feel. This is a problem. So before it gets to how you feel, so try through your mental processing, question it, challenge it. It's not real. It's not there. It's not true. And it's not fair, because sometimes we could be thinking about things that are not nice about people. Just say, no, it's not fair to be, this is waswas, let it go. Okay, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. What do you suggest for those who do not have strong social connections and relied on incidental contact in public?
Okay, so you've cut out.
How can they see connections?
Yeah. So you've cut out. Can you repeat that? I didn't hear that at all.
Oh, sorry. What do you suggest for those who do not have strong social connections and relied on incidental contact in public? How can they seek connections? I'm not sure if that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I do understand that question perfectly. What I would suggest is to seek an online community, to be honest. I've had clients who are elderly and who are who live far from even Muslim suburban, areas, and don't have connection, to easy access to halal food, or face-to-face learning and gatherings and so forth. But they actually find a lot of solace and healing and connection with online social groups. And it doesn't have to be community groups. It could be a hobby that you enjoy. So if you're a person that loves, motor car racing, getting, into a group to do with motor car racing because you like that sort of thing, and connecting with people, you've got like-minded discussions going on, you know, you can connect socially with other people. You can, there's also a lot of, you know, women's groups, you know, for women specific areas on Facebook, online. You know, I would try and stay away from, you know, those conspiracy theory support groups, because, you know, you're fearful, you feel the government is so unjust, and so you're absorbing all the information and you're finding connection with those people. This is not healthy. You know, that's what I'll say, is that those kind of support groups are not healthy. Stick to places where you will learn something new, because then you're activating your neural circuitry, you're learning, you know, you're feeling better, you're activating your prefrontal cortex. You're not entertaining the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain. So anytime that you can actually tap into the front part of the brain, where it can problem solve, make decisions, you know, think about things more logically and rationally, do so, you know, and watch, you know, programs, you know, that you know, can help you distract. Watch comedy, as long as it's not too foul, you know, because laughing helps you process as well, helps your helps your body. But when I say laughing, it's not it's actually belly laugh, like really laughing, and I love doing that a lot. Anyone who knows me very well knows that I love laughing. When people always say, you know, why you're always so content and calm, I say, I like laughing, you know. So, but I don't like the laughter that is at the expense of others, you know. So, you know, appropriate laughter, and where it's your really, and I say, and don't think this is weird, but what I do suggest you, if you're going to do this at home, make sure you warn your family you're doing it as a strategy. So then they're going to think you've gone all weird, you know. So even if you looked in the mirror, you know, so with my clients, for example, I'm actually in my room at the moment. I have a mirror that I work with them on, and I get them to look at themselves and fake laugh, you know. And obviously they think it's the weirdest strategy on this planet, and they think I'm nuts. I'm not, you know. So they'll look at themselves and they actually would start laughing because they find it weird. So, well, this is good. This is what I want you to feel. So when you go home, you know, 2-3 times a day, you know, just do this. Look at yourself and start laughing, you know, because it's actually quite good exercise. It releases endorphins, makes you feel better, improves your mood, you know. And this is especially true for elderly who can't move. So an alternative to that, you know, running on the spot, you know, especially if you have chronic pain, for example, I tend to ask people to do a lot more laughter therapy, because that belly laughing helps your cardiovascular system, you know.
Okay. Is it normal to want to withdraw from social contact entirely and just wanting to be by yourself, eating and sleeping, or sleeping?
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's me that's frozen or Hanan.
Frozen for me too.
Is it? Okay. Good. It's hard to tell. Okay. Frozen. All right.
Yes, Hanan, that's frozen.
Hanan, are you there? Or did you time yourself to? Okay. We need you. We had so many questions.
Did you want me to give her a call?
Yeah, oh, she's logged off. She may now, or she's gone off, or she may come back. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You're on.
sorry. I think it was our connection. I do apologize.
Okay, that's all right.
Okay, I'm back now. It should be okay now. I use a different connection.
Just before you start answering, it's 2 to 9. What would you like to do? We've got still some questions, or should we just finish at 9? It's really up to you.
Okay. Are the questions similar? Is it all about, you know, strategies, coping?
It's about worrying, coping, like there's financial worries. Actually, most of them I can't think of into my yeah.
Okay, I'll answer the current question, then the financial worries, and then we can end it there.
Oh, sorry, probably another one, and you don't have to go into your view, but with the conspiracy theories, Like sometimes they have family members on the constantly trying to convince them and trying to, I guess, and they don't want to deal with that. What should they do? Maybe those, and then we'll finish off. Sorry, everyone. I hope that this helps. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Okay, so when you're socially isolating and you're oversleeping, if you know, because the information and the pandemic is taking a toll, if that's your first line of response, that's fine, you know, because you're resetting and recalibrating, making sense of the world. However, it shouldn't linger. You still need to, you know, after you've had your rest, you know, try and process and be active. So being passive in this period is not helpful. That's like escape and avoidance. And escape and avoidance actually increases anxiety, increases your uncertainty as well. So what I do suggest is that you increase your level of activity. Okay, so going from that period of rest, you know, but increasing in small steps, being actively engaged. In terms of the financial worries, what I do what we all need to acknowledge is that this is real and it is impacting a lot of people. Like I drive to work, I'm an essential worker, and so I come to our clinic, and most of our clients who come from culturally and linguistically diverse communities, they actually, you know, a lot of them don't like telehealth. They actually want to come to the clinic. So we have to observe all the rules and regulations and still provide that therapy. But when I'm driving to work, I drive past Centrelink office, and there are huge lines of people who are now unemployed, you know, who are a period of uncertainty, even with the government trying to help with packages and so forth. People have mortgages, for example, you know, so they're going to be very hard hit, you know. So we need to acknowledge that that's going to be the case. There are no answers to that, except that there are groups, I know in Australia, where, you know, we have community groups who are providing food packs, help with bills also. So if you do need more information, contact your local community centre, because they've set up programs and food drives to help those most in need, whilst the uncertainty increases around your financial struggles. But yeah, it's unfortunate, you know, and it's terrible. Let's just talk real. It's actually quite terrible, because, you know, people weren't expecting this turnaround, and especially, for example, for Sydney, when we had such a great run, you know, and then all of a sudden, especially the local government areas where there's a lot of Muslims, we have, you know, a very strict lockdown response, because we've got the larger families, the easier contacts, you know, for the spread and so forth. And in Melbourne as well, you know, last year with the lockdown and certain suburbs. Yeah, so there is going to be that, you know, restricted finance. I don't have answers to that, except to reach out to those services who can support you. You know, and with the conspiracy theory question, you know, we have to understand that, you know, as humans, you know, when there is fear, we don't understand what is happening. We tend to only accept, you know, information that feeds the level of our own limited knowledge of understanding, you know, and that's why I'm quite compassionate and sympathetic to even those who hold the conspiracy theories. I mean, they're not right. It is a conspiracy theory. It's not based on facts, but they're guided by their gut feeling. They're guided by their emotion. Unfortunately, you know, giving them factual information is not going to help them. And if I was to ask or give you one golden rule with family members who hold conspiracy theories, is that your facts are not going to make a difference. In fact, if you give them facts, it's going to reinforce their own views, because, you know, that information helps them feel safe. That information was formed when they were scared. Therefore, they believe that information is the correct information. They can't think in abstract ways where it's accurate and also factual. And remember the diagram I showed you of the brain. You know, when you're under stress, there's weaker brain connectivity. When you have there's weaker brain connectivity when you're using your problem solving, because you're calm and relaxed and so forth. But when you're stressed and anxious, there's stronger brain activity in that emotional part. Okay, so information that's going to come in and they're going to accept are those that feed their anxiety. And when they're talking to you about their theories, they're actually quite anxious and fearful too, you know, and they want you to believe what they're believing. You know, they struggle to understand why you're not accepting their worldviews, you know, and so, and it doesn't matter how many degrees you have and if you're a doctor or so forth, they're always going to look at the alternative, but not all doctors, you know, believe that. Have you seen the alternative views? You know, so they're going to hold on, they're going to use a lot of cognitive dissonance, you know, and fall back on their cognitive dissonance when information challenges them. So if you try and challenge them, they're just going to fall back on their irrationality, but they don't see that the information is irrational. So I would say, okay, I understand you're stressed and you're scared, and these are your views and these are my views, you know, and so the constant challenging is you're not going to get anywhere. You know, just empathize with them, you know, because, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us differently, different ways of accepting information. I'm sure conspiracy theories also existed, you know, universally. You know, it's not a new phenomena. So whilst it can be annoying, you know, and problematic, you know, you need to also protect yourself from the constant tension and challenge of trying to convince them of something that's going to be difficult for you to do. So just gently just let go of the conversation and just do what you need to do, you know, appropriately. So and you know, those who are prone to conspiracy theories, they don't self-reflect on themselves, they will judge others. Okay, so whereas those who are basing everything on facts are generally very good at self-reflection, you know, and you actually relying on the doctors, intellectuals, and, you know, people to do the right thing. Unfortunately, the people who are holding on to the conspiracy theories are the disenfranchised people. They're scared, they're terrified, and accept that. And see, even us, like myself, who I don't hold on to the conspiracy theories, you know, I know that they're scared and terrified. You know, I know that they're being emotional and irrational. I'm not going to condemn them for it, especially in this period. We talked about normalizing our emotions, you know, that those groups are, and those people and those individuals are going to exist. So just don't challenge them, don't debate, you know, just try gently, you know, just to empathize with them, you know, and if the situation is a bit calm, okay, you can gently feed them with information. And if you find that there's a wall, you know, just pull back, you know, and if you get some pushback, just don't push it further. You know, that's all I'm going to say on that matter.
Okay, thank you so much. You must be exhausted after all that. But I really admire your passion on this, Hanan. I can see that you really want everyone to benefit and to, I guess, be better under these very difficult circumstances. So may Allah reward you. I really appreciate your contribution today. Looking at the comments, a lot of people are very happy and are thanking you as well. And just, if I've missed your question, anyone, please, apologies from now. I've been trying to make sure I address all of those, but due to limited time and the fact that we've gone over time, I may have missed some questions. So once again, thank you. Have a good, I see I'm forgetting what day it is. It's Saturday, right? So have a good weekend, everyone. Enjoy and do implement some of those tips that Hanan's provided for you. Once again, thanks, Hanan. Take care, everyone.
Alaikum, everyone.
Alaikum salam.